All right, so it says, the concept of a future redeemer, similar to Moses, is common in rabbinic literature dating to the 7th century. The rabbis who compiled the Talmud and other key Jewish texts in the Middle Ages assumed the final messianic redeemer would follow the pattern of the first redeemer, Moses. Thus, not surprisingly, they noted a multitude of patterns between the two. Here are a few examples. Pesikta 5:8 reads, as the first one appeared among Israel, this is with regard to Moses, and then disappeared from among them, so shall the last Redeemer will appear among Israel and then disappear from among them. In other words, just as Moses had 2 comings to Israel, the Mashiach will have a first coming and a second coming. I'll stop that thought there. I'll return in a couple of moments. Let's be clear on something. The same rabbis that reject the messiahship of Yeshua, the same rabbis that reject his death as a form of atonement, the same ones that reject the idea that he could die and come back, they are teaching all throughout the oral tradition that the final messianic king will be exactly like Moses, in that just as Moses appears, disappears, and reappears, so shall the final messianic redeemer appear, disappear, and reappear. What are we talking? Just as Moses had 2 comings to the people, so shall HaMashiach have 2 comings. I have a question for you. In light of knowing that this is what the rabbis teach, would you agree that it would be problematic for them to just outright reject the notion that Yeshua could have a second coming, when in fact they already are on record teaching that the final messianic king has a first and second coming? Would you find their rejection of him simply because he could have a second coming, would you find that problematic and maybe even hypocritical? If so, tell us why. If nay, tell us why.
It can be seen as being hypocritical because you're already speaking of the concept of a first and a second coming in regard to Moses. Now, I think the differ will come. It will be that lifelong argument, well, he died. And the concept is, I know with my school of thought and the way I've been taught in many circles, when the Mashiach comes, he's just going to have this, he's going to come and do everything in one smooth swoop. And I believe that's where it gets a lot of people, is the death part. I believe him going away and then coming back again, I don't believe really people can have really issues with that. I believe that what brings in that dividing wall is when you talk about, well, there's no mention of a Mashiach dying. And when you read that, what you just read there, I believe if it's saying, okay, he comes, he goes, and he comes back, it's still that notion of ejecting that concept of dying and coming back. But definitely, what is it? Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. What is the definition of death in the Torah, right? There's this definition of death in Webster's dictionary. There's a definition of death in Oxford's dictionary. There's a Western understanding of what death is. My question for you is, what is the definition of death from the perspective and lens of the Torah?
I believe when the breath leaves the body, you're no longer active in this body. Your soul goes back to the maker. Your physical vessel is no more.
If someone's spirit is taken from them and brought to the Creator, we would say as Israelites that that person died. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's asleep with the fathers. As they say, he's sleeping with the fathers.
As they say. Now, we're going somewhere, so watch this. what happened to Elijah the prophet? Because there are Israelites that say he was taken up, but we know his spirit was taken up. But as you just defined, the definition of death in the Torah is when someone's spirit is taken up from them to the Creator, even as you agree. That happened to Elijah the prophet. And the Torah and the Tanakh is clear that even though he was taken up, which we understand, when you scrutinize it, of course he died. His soul was taken up. That's the very definition of death. Yet he was promised to return. So I asked this question, conceptually speaking, since we have a template for someone dying and being promised to return, what would be so problematic about Yeshua dying and returning?
Based off of all that, it shouldn't be anything problematic with it. I believe the biggest issue is how people believe on him and what people's idea of who he is really the biggest problematic part for it. But when you just speak on that, Elijah's died, but he's coming back. People believe that Elijah is coming back. So for a Christian to say, well, we believe Yeshua is coming back, we shouldn't be up to arms. That sounds dumb. That's crazy talk. It can't be crazy talk because we believe the same thing. So we can't have it both ways. We can't say that's a part of our tradition and culture. We believe Elijah is coming back. And then for a Christian or a Messianic to say, well, we believe Yeshua is coming back. You talking crazy talk. On that alone, that's a double standard. But I believe it all links back to how people feel about Yeshua and how they believe on him.
That's
and
right.
For an Israelite, we just like, I'm not believing on Yeshua like that. I don't see him that way. So it becomes foreign to them to even think that way about him.
Okay, so in your worldview and in your eye view, you can see the plausibility of Yeshua dying and coming back, because after all, that's what happened to Elijah. He died. Elijah's been gone for now 2,800 years at least. We can say roughly 3,000 years. Even if someone doesn't believe he died, according to science, he died, because we don't know nobody that lived 3,000 years. The oldest human being recorded in the Bible is Methuselah, 969. So we saying Elijah is 3 times that, right? So I want to consider something, right? Consider this in thought, right? And again, objective, weighing everything with a clear lens, right? If we know Elijah left this world, which by definition, the spirit returning unto the Creator, that's death in the Torah. Yet he's promised to come back. Whether someone agrees in Yeshua or not isn't even the question. The real question, or the real statement to now say, is he cannot be invalidated as a Messiah simply because he died and is promised to return, and because we already have and see that template in Elijah. Right? That's just in us being objective. So, which leads me to this point, which I think is equally potent and equally powerful. Because in the Old Testament community, the thing that we harp on is that, well, Yeshua failed. He did not rebuild the temple. I'm going in reverse order. He did not gather in the exile host of the children of Israel, and he did not judge the nations, again in reverse order. So we say he failed, because those are the 3 most important things that the Messiah is coming to do. However, the greatest minds among our people, the rabbis and the sages, they said that they wouldn't be one Messiah, but there would be 2. One would precede the coming of the last. One is first coming to suffer and die, and his death will serve as an atonement for the sins of the people. The second one would do those 3 things aforementioned: judge the nations, gather in the exile hosts, and spawn the rebuilding of the temple. To which I asked, and you even, added light on, are the rabbis infallibly right? Are they infallible, therefore making them infallibly right? Absolutely not. But more importantly, they themselves admit that, because it's in rabbinic teachings that one of the things the Messiah is coming to do is to clarify areas of thought that they got wrong, which is why I then asked the question, what if their conception of Mashiach ben Joseph and Mashiach ben David as being two completely different people, what if that's wrong? What if it's simply that it's one person, like Elijah, who died and is not coming back a different person, like Elijah, but is coming back as themselves? That would be plausible, because the only template apart from Yeshua that we know that to be true for is Elijah. We don't believe anybody's coming back other than Elijah. So as far as we know, if someone is dying and coming back, they are coming back. So it would then be problematic on behalf of the oral tradition to divide and cut the Messiah in that way. It wouldn't be consistent. And then we would have to ask questions. And the questions would possibly be, was there an agenda? Because remember, the same rabbis that are writing in the oral tradition vehemently detest Yeshua. They say very horrible things about his character. They say very horrible things about his mother, things that is not typical writing style in the Talmud. The wickedest of people in the Talmud are still treated with great respect with regard to their shortcomings. But with regard to Yeshua, they take all the gloves off. So a historian and a scholar is going to say the writing style shifts when they speak of Yeshua. It's almost as if they have a personal issue with him. And at that point, you have to say, from an objective stance, how viable is their commentary on him when they obviously have such great disdain for him?